for tuning in. It is the #1 podcast. I am your host, Coach Jake. I got my trusty crazy sign. Let's see if we can make it do some crazy stuff here. What do you want? You want some of that? You want some of that? What's up, Rich Homie? Urban Combat. How about that one? Hard to miss that one. David, Kendrick. What's up, Vet Muscle Man? Happy to see you guys. As ever, if you want to interact with me, please, I would very much appreciate it. You just type in very much a materialist. Like I think a lot of people who claim science don't realize that philosophy is senior to science. It's meta, right? Like so, science is really kind of a branch in epistemology or the theory of knowledge and how it's acquired and how you verify it and how do you know what is truth or facts, like these kind of things. So, I used to. What's up, Alfie? What's up, Silentium Wrestling? Happy to see you guys. So, I always like to define things. And, Arthur C. Clarke, the guy who wrote 2001, A Space Odyssey, which became the crazy movie. Whoa, that one's too much. Okay, I'll leave this alone. It's distracting me. So, to Arthur C. Clarke defined magic as any technology that is sufficiently advanced that we can't really explain. And so we default to these explanations that are magical, right? So the implication here is that magic happens all around us all the time. So, think about our technology, just like a tablet or a phone. Back in the day, they would call that scrying, 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 where you are looking into a mirror or something and trying to get a vision. Well, now it's actually like you could be streaming films, you can have a conversation like we are. Pretty magical to maybe somebody from 300 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago. Mind-blowing. Flying in planes, going to the moon, traveling in cars, some of the medical advancements, bringing people back from the dead after, they've been dead 5 minutes or 10 minutes, those kinds of things. So, but I think magic, there's all kinds of different definitions. So Arthur C. Clarke defined it as anything that was sufficient technology beyond our comprehension, right? I think that's a good definition. I think the famous occultist, magician, whatever, Aleister Crowley, right? Wasn't magic some sort of instrument of the will, right? It was an idea of a manifestation of one's will, which then begs another definition. What's the definition of will? But my point is, I think it's important to look at these things. And I want to look at some, I always like looking at the etymology of words. And I think it's important. What's up, Sherm? What's up, Kendo Jedi? Good to see you. Sinage Doc. Happy to see you guys. I'm out on, right now, I actually got banned on Facebook. It might have to do with live. I've been hearing a lot of people that broadcast live are getting these 24-hour bans. So I'm sorry, I'm reaching out to you guys on mostly YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram right now. But I wanted to go like, I think one of the big differences, say, between the shift, right? I've read this quote before where Friedrich Nietzsche basically tries to have people understand that the transition from magic to science, this is relevant to scientific wrestling, uh, but the transition from magic to science was to do with time. I'm not sure, right? Like in the same way that I can only hear a certain band, a certain wavelength of sound, or that I can only see a certain bandwidth of radiation, there's still other stuff that exists. And so there's been many, many interesting experiments with regards to time that show that our perception is not the whole picture of how time operates, right? So we have all these very institutionalized ideas of what time means. And one of the greatest things, Google this, write this down. This will totally blow your mind. And this is how I started losing my materialism and adopting more of what I call magical thinking, which is I believe can be just as rigorous. And I think it really should be in the domain of like frontier science, right? So I would consider magic the least reliable of scientific operators, or science is the most reliable operations in magic, the highest probability of occurring. So let's talk about time. I would look up a wonderful experiment, totally fascinating. I mean, there's some great YouTube videos that actually do the visualization for you. Google this, write it down. Delayed choice quantum array. If you don't know that, which led to what's known as the Copenhagen interpretation, right? So I really went down this rabbit hole of I think it may be a bit of a cliche, sadly, but it's how I found out, how I came to this conclusion, was really trying to study quantum mechanics, right? So my master's degree is in financial mathematics, okay, and well, actually, it's what's called financial engineering. And one of these central equations is the Black-Scholes equation, which is used to price options. And the difficulty in pricing options was some of the randomness, the stochastic nature of price movement. Okay, and one of the guys went back and they came up with this. Myron Scholes and Fisher Black were the guys they won a Nobel Prize for this equation. They really cracked it with the help of a physicist named Bachelier. And Bachelier came up with this equation. It also ended up helping Einstein on what's known as Brownian motion. It should actually be Bachelierian motion, but these random processes. Okay. Anyway, so I'm going deep down this rabbit hole. When I worked in finance, sure, I had a master's degree in financial engineering. I was one of the very first, because I got my degree in 2002, to actually have a specialized degree in this. Prior to being able to hire people, banks hiring people with this specified training, they were pulling people from math and physics to do these complicated calculations and modeling. Okay. So, for example, one of my first bosses out of grad school in 2004 was a woman at this gigantic bank, had 5,000 employees, was the 8th largest mortgage originator. My title was manager of oversight of complex instruments. What a crazy title that was. But this woman was brilliant, dude. Like, she had her bachelor's in physics, a master's in electrical engineering, and a PhD in finance. Okay. So it was a lot of pressure, honestly, for me to be out of grad school and have such a brilliant person as a boss. But it opened in doors for me, and because I started out with economics and finance and money, and that's like where my interests lie. But it ended up making me very fascinated with physics. And in particular, I went, instead of going to the macro, I went to the micro. I didn't go into astrophysics. That wasn't so interesting to me. I started looking at quantum physics because it just was so weird and fascinating, all the weird stuff that they were discovering in quantum physics. The double slit experiment is a very interesting thing because there was a shift, right? What esteemed philosopher of science Thomas Kuhn would call K-U-H-N, Thomas K-U-H-N Kuhn, a paradigm shift, right? And the shift was created due to the anomalies when physicists started trying to measure small phenomena and understand things at the atomic level. And that's really what quantum physics was about. So one of the experimental designs that they came up with was called the double slit experiment. Okay. So what's up, Coach Babel? What's up, Surf and Scorpion? PCI Jiu-Jitsu, what's up? So we're talking magic, but I'm getting there through quantum physics. Okay. So if this is a cliche, I'm very sorry, but this is my path. This is how I came to it. So the double slit experiment was very, very interesting, right? There was a lot of stuff happening right at the turn of the 20th century that was upending a lot of what was understood in science. Now, this is the weird thing, right? So it starts out with like alchemy, and it starts out with the magicians. In fact, John Maynard Keynes, probably the most influential, unfortunately, economist of the 20th century, John Maynard Keynes, had other interests, and he wrote a book called The Last Magician. The Last Magician. And who was that about? Anybody in the comments? Okay, let's take a guess. Who? Don't Google it. Let's just see if you actually know this. The book, The Last Magician, written by John Maynard Keynes. Who is that about? Who was the last magician that Keynes was referring to? I'm going to give you 3 seconds, okay? Starting now. 3. Come on, nobody knows this? 2. Oh, come on, people. We got the internet. Okay, I don't want you to cheat by looking it up, but you could have looked this up before. It was about Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton. Now, Isaac Newton, super genius, virgin, by the way. Maybe like fitting into the nerd cliche a little bit here. But Isaac Newton, this guy came up with calculus, came up with classical physics, mechanics, like the stuff you learn, like distance equals rate times time, classical mechanics, came up with optics. This guy was a massive genius, like unbelievable, like not just one invention that was kind of cool here. Things that he basically was ushered in the new era of science. And this is why Keynes called him the last magician, because magic ended kind of with him in a way because of these other developments he did. But he was a magician, okay? Like in the sense of he studied what was called magic back then. It was proto-science, not quite science, okay? So do you guys, for those of you watching on the Instagram, does it make sense? 2273. Yeah. does it make sense why I called my company Scientific Wrestling? I love science. I love the philosophy of science, the history of science. So anyway, John Maynard Keynes writes his book, The Last Magician, about Isaac Newton. Okay. So Isaac Newton, all the writings he did on physics, optics, calculus, all that are dwarfed by the literature he put out on magic. Okay. Like angels and alchemy and these other weird topics. Okay. So, but the funny thing is that it ushered in this very materialistic view of science for the next couple of hundred years until we get to the quantum physicists and Einstein. Okay. So both of them had different things. So there was the quantum physics and then the relativity of Einstein. Now, as I mentioned, the relativity of Einstein was actually largely helped through this notion of Brownian motion that was developed by Bachelier in France to determine stock prices, the random movements, stochastic calculus. Okay. But what happened? What shifted from this paradigm shift that I was saying, like Thomas Kuhn, the structure of scientific revolutions, would consider a paradigm shift, were these anomalies that guys in the quantum physics field and the guys studying relativity, like Einstein, discovered. And it's this. This is the weird thing. And the funny thing is these discoveries happened in the 1900s and earlier, and here we are in the 21st century, and we're still playing catch up. Most people don't think in terms of this stuff, but there was a shift. The post-Newton classical science, classical mechanics, physics said that reality was objective, that there was such a thing as objective reality. Well, all of a sudden, the data starts accumulating, and there's facts. Like we could do things like distance equals rate times time, force vectors, things like the things in classical physics, in chemistry, that do say that there is something physical here. There is something real that we could predict with these models, right? These basic models, the simple machines of physics, of classical physics. But Einstein and the quantum physicists said, wait, guys, by our experimentation, by our figures, reality is not all objective. We need to really look at the subjectivity of science here. That objectivity and science are not synonymous, and that there is, in fact, a central place for subjectivity in scientific endeavors, right? So with regards to relativity, basically where you are is relative. You, the central, the subject, can determine the rate of speed of something else. There's no such thing as fixed space because it's all relative to something else. That was one big shift, right? So we start entertaining these ideas of light speed and possible time travel and things of that nature. But then the quantum physicists started doing these experiments, and I think this is probably the experiment that's been, if it's not the delayed choice quantum eraser, then it's definitely the double slit experiment. I'm not sure 100%, but I do know that what I had heard is that the delayed choice quantum eraser experiment is the most verified experiment in human history because people just can't fucking handle it. They can't believe it until they run it themselves, and they're like, God, this is so weird. Well, to understand that, you need to understand the double slit experiment. The double slit experiment is basically this. Now, this is the Copenhagen interpretation. There's plenty of different interpretations. I think this one, I don't know. You don't know which one's right. You just kind of go with whatever you think the evidence suggests. Okay. The Copenhagen interpretation of the double slit experiment is this, that consciousness affects reality. That the very act of measuring a phenomenon turns it from being a probability into a discrete thing. In math, there is continuous math and discrete math. Okay, continuous math is a curve. Discrete is like dots. Okay, another way to look at this is the wave function. Okay, so what the implication of Copenhagen interpretation of physics is that the very active consciousness of measurement of attention collapses the wave function. Okay, that's all so jargony sounding. What they've found through actual experimentation is that light changes depending on whether you are observing it or not. If you're not observing it, it's a wave. Okay. And if you are observing it, it's a photon. It's a discrete package. Instead of a wave, it's like a photon. Okay. So what they were able to do with the double slit experiment, imagine a giant electrical plug, you know, with the two slits. Imagine a blown up one. And behind it, you put a film emulsion. Like the old days, before digital cameras, they had film, and it would open the aperture and it would burn the image on the screen for a moment, and then you get the picture. So imagine you had a film, and then in front of it, this double slit. And depending if the thing was being measured or not, or observed, when they turned on the light switch, the emulsion, if you can imagine you're in a pool and somebody splashes and there's a wave that goes out in the pool, right? Now, the second it hits the electrical outlet holes, that wave breaks, and then it creates two little waves from the holes, two little ripples, half circles that move out, and they start crisscrossing. I don't know if you can imagine this or not. And then when those ripples hit the emulsion, it's these faint strips where all the ripples have crisscrossed, right? So waves, like a wave, literally like water. Okay. That's if nobody's watching it. But if somebody's observing the experiment, the light turns into photons like a spitball, picks one of the slits, and then it creates like a bunch of spitballs behind that. It's the craziest thing, right? So what they did with the delayed choice quantum eraser is they showed basically that you can that events in the present can affect events in the past. It is very difficult for me to explain this, frankly, because I have not converted the visuals in my mind into being able to explain it. I taught high school science for a while, and it's so much easier with a visual aid, and I don't have that here. But there are great ones on YouTube called the Delayed Choice Quantum Eraser. Watch a couple of them. It is crazy. It's crazy. When I started getting into all this, it really started radically changing my understanding of the world and the central role of the mind and consciousness, and really changed. Like, I forever thought that consciousness was a byproduct of the brain in the way that like digestion is a byproduct of the stomach. But I've changed. I'm of the belief, and I'm not alone in this. So here's the weird thing. All the guys that were seminal in the quantum revolution in science, a lot of these guys like Bohr and Schrödinger and all these names, they were very influenced by the Upanishad. They were like Upanishad scholars of ancient Sanskrit, ancient Hindu texts. So like Robert Oppenheimer, the guy who developed the nuclear bomb in the Los Alamos tests that changed the world, right? He said, when they launched it and they interviewed him after, he said, I have become the destroyer of worlds, which was a reference. I'm not sure if it was Shiva. I think it might have actually been Vishnu, like a quote from Vishnu. And there's another quote from him that was curious, because all these guys really studied these ancient texts and got a lot of their ideas actually from these tomes in the past. So it's very fascinating, this magical thinking influencing the modern world and creating something like the nuclear bomb. So, somebody asked him, what was it like being there for the first nuclear test? And he had to correct them. And he said, well, the first nuclear test in modern times. And it just kind of passed by everybody. But what he was implying was that in the Mahabharata, there was descriptions of wars basically with these nuclear devices. Right? So now we get into this weird world of maybe like Graham Hancock, right, who is doing real radical research in archaeology and really making a strong case that a lot of the narratives that we've been fed are bullshit, and that humankind might be significantly older than we ever thought, where most of our records go back 10,000 years, which is interesting. Historically it's hard to go beyond that. But what's interesting about that is that coincides with the last major ice age. So what if, think about it right now. What if there were advanced societies in the past and they put all their data onto a storage medium like we do? We put it on silicon and it must be powered by electricity. So if we had a catastrophic event right now, I don't know, meteors or some bullshit, if we had a catastrophic event right now and it killed the electrical grid, and we had scientists from 300 years in the future look back, it would go back to the 1930s before everything was going on to transistors, the records, right? If they even stayed around, right? Because paper decays. So this is very, very interesting. The Graham Hancock stuff is absolutely fascinating. But this, really all goes to this idea of changing knowledge, which is really, I think, what time measures most, right? I think that, we can set clocks and times and have the atomic clocks and all this shit. But really what it is a measure of change, of dynamism, of the fact that things are constantly moving and evolving and shifting, right? So anyway, I don't know, it looks like we've got a bunch of people on the stream, but nobody commenting. So I must totally have entered fucking egghead territory and alienated everybody, but at least it must be interesting because people are on the chat. Curious about your thoughts about, establishment science. These are listen, man, it's kind of broken. Something I suggest everybody look up. Okay, so one thing is to look up all this stuff on magical thinking, and I would suggest that you maybe start with the delayed choice quantum eraser experiment. Fascinating. But establishment science, this is why these slogans like trust the science and stuff. First of all, that's the most anti-scientific slogan I can ever imagine. It's not about trust. It's not about faith. Oh yeah, big wall daddy, 10,000 years, the same time frame, bicameral mind. Yeah, Julian Jaynes. For those of you who don't know who Julian Jaynes is, he wrote this book called The Origin of Consciousness, and something like The Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. Okay, and so it's a very interesting premise, and there's been a lot of research to actually verify, to kind of justify the claims that Julian Jaynes made. He made just a simple observation. He was a psychologist. I think he was a Princeton guy, if I remember right. And he basically, is he a psychologist or was he a literature guy or a little bit of both? But he came to this conclusion by looking at how the texts from, say, a certain time frame shifted from being in the third person narration to first person, and that this was a major shift in modern consciousness, where it was supposedly, according to Jaynes, and I think there is some data to back this, that a lot of the old mind prior to this breakdown of the bicameral mind, a lot of the old mind operated like what we would call kind of psychosis or schizophrenia today, where people heard the voices of the gods and that commanded them to do things. Now, the irony is did we really have a breakdown of that? Or did we somehow, in a way, replace this idea of the gods or this bicameral mind just rename it to our ego. You know what I mean? Because it's interesting. Like, think about somebody who wants to quit smoking. They want to quit smoking, and yet they keep smoking. So there's like a conflict there, right? And I do think that is because I don't know that we had a breakdown of the bicameral mind. I think maybe that we integrated it, if that makes any sense. I don't know. This is super. I feel like this is like the Stump Jake show. Marcus, our first comment. Thanks, brother. Wiggin in the house. What's up, dude? Wiggin, happy to see you guys. Okay, so here's an interesting story about Wiggin that has to do with science. A lot of people know me. I'm a super nerd on a lot of subjects. Probably my life's calling is my scientific wrestling project. Okay, which is really about catch as catch can wrestling and growing it, expanding it, and keeping it relevant. So forever, I just kind of was like, well, my mom put me in wrestling when I was 4, which was like 1977. So it's like 45 years as a student of the wrestling game. But I just thought it had to do with that. And maybe I happened to see the UFC and had done some judo and did some pro wrestling, and everything just threw in a pot, mixed together, and here I am, and done all the crazy shit that I've done for this sport. Okay, then now this is an interesting thing. Have you ever heard of the Minnesota longitudinal twin study? Good content. Hi, friend. Yes, hello. Good content. Okay, I'll take it for granted that is the truth. Oh no, hi friend is saying that, and you're saying good content. Thanks. I mean, it's just the contents of my brain, dude. So the Minnesota longitudinal twin study actually was born out of a lot of Nazi experiments that they were doing, but they at least did not violate the Nuremberg codes that came out of the atrocities the Nazis did. But the Nazis did a lot of experimentation with identical twins, right? Because an identical twin is a clone, and they could use these identical twins to really test these nature versus nurture hypotheses, okay? So fast forward, the Minnesota longitudinal twin study happens, is in line with the Nuremberg Code, isn't like totally unethical and evil. By the way, the vaccine mandate violated the Nuremberg Code. You need to fucking really let that settle in next time you settle on the side of the people that are the pro-jabbers. Okay, I mean, or even the pro-science. So the one thing I wanted to say is look up the replication crisis. This is going to show you there's some serious problems in science, and it has to do with statistical significance and p-values. Sorry, I'm a mathematician. Just Google what I say, okay? I don't know. Fuck, I could be wrong. But I'm giving you some nuggets here to look up, all right? So the Minnesota longitudinal twin study basically took twins at Peter Tehanye says, tell us more about your pro wrestling experience. Okay, I will do that. We're only a half hour in, so I'll stay here for another 20 minutes. I promise I'll get to it, Peter. Hang in there, okay? I promise. What's up, Smee Carl? What's up, Anthony Maines? So Minnesota longitudinal twin study, basically they took twins separated at birth and adopted by different families, and then they looked at, okay, totally different environments, different cities, different parents, different schools, different food, different longitude, different latitude, like totally different, but they were identical twins. And then what they found was this crazy phenomenon that, man, these people never met each other, although they're clones, never met. They married people with the same name. They drove the same kind of car that was the same color. They parted their hair the same way. In not 100%, but in a way that was so like outside of the realm of coincidence, it was mind-boggling. And the implication is that, man, we might be a lot more programmed than we really previously thought. Okay. Now you have to get into the science of epigenetics, which is allows for a tweak on that programming. Okay. So this isn't set in stone. It's not determinism or fate, your genes. The epigenetics have a lot to play there. But, oh yeah, Big Wall Daddy, the replication crisis. Replication crisis in science. my big hero in that, and also on all this shit that went down with the fucking vaccines and public policy, John Ioannidis, statistician, epidemiologist out of Stanford, really early in the game, really right. Nobody listened to him. They vilified him in the press. Stanford PhD, like fucking some dumb wonk, like, no, whatever. Anyway, brilliant man. Okay, replication crisis. But anyway, this is how it's connected to wrestling and Wigan and me. So I did 23andMe, right? You know what that is? It's that genetic test. You spit in a vial and they put in a centrifuge and they tell you all this shit about your genetic code. Well, come to find out, I thought that, like, you know, somehow this wrestling stuff had to do with choices I made. And I'm sure there were a lot, right, of me making choices. However, come to find out, my father's, hence my last name, Shannon, Irish, Shannon River, Shannon Airport, right? My father's genetic line haplogroup traces all the way as far back as they could trace to about 200 miles west of Wigan in Ireland, across the channel. Fucking mind blowing, dude. The other thing is I found on my mom's side, so Catch as Catch Can is an amalgam of Irish rough and tumble, right? Because it was mostly done by the poor in the North England, which was predominantly Irish. A little bit of collar elbow, this Lancashire up and down fighting, and then a mix of Flemish weavers, like from the Netherlands, the Dutch, adding in their mix. Well, my mom, on her side, were heavily Dutch, and they were Dutch weavers outside of Den Durgan. I don't even know where the fuck that is, but it was, anyway, it was like, oh my God, nature, nurture, that one's clear. Okay, so, enough me just riffing on science. Let's talk pro wrestling. So you wanted to know about my pro wrestling experience. So my pro wrestling experience happened. I actually never really liked pro wrestling until I actually did it. I was not a big fan. Honestly, I never watched it. Didn't know much about it. My dad took me to a show in McNichols Arena. I want to say it's in the late 80s. I remember Ricky the Dragon Steamboat was on it. Ric Flair was on that show. Trying to think who else was on that show. But I wasn't into it, dude. I thought like Chuck Norris, the Octagon was cooler, right? I was more into martial arts movies. And then I went to pro wrestling. Now, the first thing that got me excited is that, okay, I got a couple things where I get nerdy. Math, business development, creating businesses, Big Wall Daddy. Oh, yeah. The tubules on the... there's been a lot of controversy on that, actually. I think it's a cool, interesting framework on Orch. What's it called? Orch. Slipping my mind right now. Anyway, sorry, Big Wall Daddy. I started pro wrestling, and I didn't really have much of a taste for it. I have a few things that I'm really into: business and grappling. Okay. Now, I'm also, I'm like a bit of a nerd for philosophy of science and history of science. I'm a pretty big nerd with regards to comedy. Like, I used to collect comedy albums. I used to have a really big comedy album collection and really enjoyed some of my favorite guys were like Red Fox and Lenny Bruce. George Carlin's probably my favorite of all time. But one that I really, really loved early on was Andy Kaufman. And I stumbled on this disc. I was working in a video store at the time. And one of my coworkers was like, oh my God, dude, you have to see this. This is the craziest shit. I was like, what is it? And he hands me this tape, and it's called I'm From Hollywood. If you've not seen this, you need to see this, especially if you're not a fan of pro wrestling. Maybe you might understand how I got sucked into it. So I see this video. This is the documentary that Andy Kaufman made himself of his journey into pro wrestling, which later, Jim Carrey made a movie about him, a biopic, and there was a lot of that material redone for the movie. But the original documentary is brilliant. It is the funniest shit you'll ever see. He has another one called My Breakfast with Blassie. Now, I saw both of those. I'm guessing it was 95 or 96 when I first saw those. I've already been grappling jiu-jitsu for at least 2 or 3 years at this time. I worked with guys like Kaseka Munez, Ricardo Miguel, Pedro Sauer, Carly Gracie, not Half, but I went to Half School when it first opened in the Mission District, and Kurt Osiander was running the class. So I had already been grappling for a while. I remember I had started wrestling as a peewee. I'd done martial arts. And so I see this ridiculous show. And all of a sudden, like, I understand, at least from maybe Kaufman's perspective, the appeal of pro wrestling from a theatrical side. And it just opened my mind to it. And then at the same time, I happened to be dating this girl, this stripper. She was super hot for me at the time. Like, total mistake. Never do it. What's that Dr. Dre song? Can't turn a hoe into a housewife or whatever. I did not know that. That song hadn't come out yet. And torturous relationship. But I was trying to impress her, and she was into pro wrestling. So I was like, all right, I kind of been doing this grappling thing. It's cool. I'm not really getting traction with it. I'm not connected. I don't know how to get bookings. I had big plans. I wanted to be something big in my life, but I just wasn't networked, and I didn't really know anybody. And so long story short, I try out for a local indie pro wrestling promotion, and I'm like, okay, this is cool. I'm going to give it a try. I met a couple people who ended up, they're big names in the business now, and we all started together. And I ended up being probably one of the first to have some modest success early. And I got a WWE tryout for WWE Tough Enough. I think they had, they had 5,000 applicants, and they only invited like something like, I think it was like 50 or 100 or 200, some small number. And I got picked and invited to go out to Madison or to Times Square when they used to have the WWE restaurant facility down there. And Taz and Al Snow were there and did my tryout and whatever. I got picked up by the Vans Warped Tour and toured with them, toured the United States, got invited to tour Europe. I had another girlfriend who was another stripper who talked me into not going. It's a regret that I have. I would have loved to tour Europe as well. Wrestled Vampiro in the Toronto Sky Dome, trained with, for those of you who are nerds on the pro wrestling scene, the Japanese scene, trained with T2P from Toriumon, from Ultimo Dragon's promotion down in Mexico City. Well, now Calpan, which is outside of Mexico City. And then trained with another Japanese promotion school, pro wrestling, Tetsuo, or Pro Wrestling Iron, which was an offshoot of Pro Wrestling Noah, run by Bison Smith and Mike Modest and Donovan Morgan up in Hayward, California. And it was instrumental in a weird way because I've always been into the martial arts, never really liked pro wrestling. Kind of got into it because it allowed me to get a stage and a platform, and I thought that was cool. And I was thinking more about it from comedy until, because I'm in pro wrestling and I'm talking to people and sharing my interests, they start telling me about Japanese wrestling. And as I learn more about Japanese wrestling, I learn about Catch as Catch Can. And right at this time, I think I started this school in 99, and Sakuraba had already started coming up, right? I think in 97, he beat Silveria, the black belt, in that UFC, the one UFC he's ever been in. So, anyway, I don't know if that satisfies your or that's it. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I don't know if it helps you with the pro wrestling, but while I was in there, I was still doing grappling and taking pro wrestling bookings and trying to do it all, right? Kind of like Billy and Carl and these guys. They took pro wrestling bookings because they were getting money doing that, and then keeping the Catch as Catch Can alive in the training rooms. And that's kind of what I was noticing a lot with the Japanese style pro wrestling. So yeah, okay, Peter, good. I hope that helps. He said amazing stories. Thank you. I don't know if they're amazing, but I hope they're at least modestly interesting. Yeah, cool stuff. And what's funny is now I really dedicated myself starting in 2003. I made a radical shift. I was like, okay, 2003, I'm 30 years old. And I realized, I have a couple other things I want to do. I've already toured. I know that I'm not into it, right? I didn't like the touring. I didn't like it. That kind of popped a bubble for me in terms of like actually wanting to be like a pro wrestler or anything like that. So I was like, well, I fucking hate touring. I don't like that. I'm 30 years old. So, my expiration date, and my body has been through the ringer a bit. I've had cancer and a couple other things that do cause problems for me in terms of physicality. I don't really give a fuck. I still throw myself out there, but I've racked up a few injuries. And anyway, so for me, I wanted to be a family man. I wanted kids. I got 3 kids, a wife. I've been married 16 years. And so I just had these other goals, and pro wrestling was definitely not it. It just kind of was this thing, almost like the financial math degree that I got in 2002. It was this thing that I could do, and it was a means to an end. Chad, what's up, dude? Chad George, dude, mad respect, dude. I know that we're friends, but I'm also a huge fan, dude. Like, I just love what you're doing, man. Just keep freaking going. I love watching your videos and all that stuff. So I'm glad you're in on the stream, dude. Good to see you. I had actually a couple of your guys at my camp, so I hope that was down in San Diego. So I hope that they Gabby and is it Ryan? My memory is not so good, but anyway, so yeah, like Sakuraba is coming up. My real true passion is martial arts and grappling. I'm in this pro wrestling scene. I'm heavily around Japanese wrestlers, so I'm getting insight into how this actually works. Sakuraba's mowing through the Gracies, which was basically like a flat earther being proven right at the time. It was like so mind blowing. And I just was in this position where I was observing a lot of this and around the right people. And I was also heavily involved with a fraternal organization of wrestlers called the Cauliflower Alley Club. And they started connecting me with these old timers. I started putting together these pieces. Now, mind you, I'm a fucking nerd and I'm really good at research. So I start tying together pieces and I figure out all of this, start studying, putting out the books, all that kind of stuff, connect with Billy Robinson, connect with Carl Gotch. I just went right to the freaking top and it worked out. And so here we are. So, I just did a podcast with a friend of mine, Cale Hauser. Hopefully it'll be out pretty soon. I got a couple big podcast interviews that I just did. I've got another one tonight with Hannibal, the pro wrestler, the guy up in Canada. I'm excited to be on that show. But I was talking to my friend Cale on his, and he called it, like, I can't even remember what the fuck word he called it. It's basically somebody who's a polymath, which sounds fancy, but it just is somebody who might have expertise in a couple domains. And, I think really what has served me the most is what Billy would always say, Billy Robinson. He says, you have to learn how to learn. And I think that's why I can kind of do well in these domains, because I just really figured out that one thing. And in fact, Billy was not big on compliments, and I take this is like means more to me than my master's degree in financial math. I'm serious, or my undergraduate in English, or any of my other things. Billy put me over publicly and said, Jake, like, I've never heard him give this compliment to anybody. He said, Jake is a great learner, and because of him, Catch as Catch Can is going to come back. Now, that's a blessing and a curse, because you have somebody of his stature compliment you and say you're a great learner, but then say that I'm the one that's going to bring Catch back. It's a lot of pressure. Okay. Now, to me, pressure is privilege, right? That's how you make lemonade. You got to squeeze some lemons. You got to put them under pressure, right? Coals into diamonds, all that shit. But I do need your help, right? So I've done an ungodly amount of work. I got banned for Facebook again. I have no idea why. I think it's these streams. I think that like it might violate their terms of service. I have no fucking idea. But I did post on Facebook the other day about 43 or 44 different things that I've produced, most of them around wrestling. Because I've done a lot of work in this field, a lot of research, produced a lot of content. But because I have done that, right? Like William Blake, the mystic poet, once said, "The road to excess leads to the palace of wisdom." And so I did excessive amounts of work on this subject. And the palace of wisdom that's led me to is that I can't do it alone. Okay. And so, I will have a hand in Catch as Catch Can getting huge. I have a big vision. It's going to happen. Okay. I'm setting the pieces right now to where even if I get hit by a bus, it's going to happen. I'm setting it up right now. Okay. But I need your help. The two things that I believe are going to be the future of this, and I think maybe part of the reason Billy and Carl put this burden on me, Carl Gotch, I do have high standards. I am a very good learner, and I work my ass off. I do. I outproduce pretty much everybody that I know, and the people that I don't are my mentors. Okay. But I do need your help. The two-pronged approach where I'm at right now is we need to reach as many people as possible. Okay. I have two vehicles for doing that, two separate prongs in the attack, and I need your help with it. The first is Shoot Pro Wrestling. Okay. I did my inaugural show totally just off the cusp, just threw it together like as an experiment and just put my cell phone up. No commentary team, no DJ, no editing, like just put up a camera to live stream it. And we got over 25,000 views. Okay. I can do 100 times that now, but I need your help. I did that first one for free and I got 25,000 views. Then I said, okay, listen, I don't know what you guys know about business, but like, unless you have money, you can't make things happen. Okay. I don't want to even really get philosophical. It's just a fact of life. Okay. So I was like, okay, this was cool, but I didn't have sponsors. I didn't really have a way to monetize it. So I thought, okay, I'm going to make a pay-per-view out of it. I charged $10 for the pay-per-view. I got 100 people to sign up. That's not sustainable. That's not good enough. You understand? To go from 25,000 down to like 100. Not fucking no bueno. So, and then the second one, I thought, well, maybe it's a fluke. We had a good gate. We had a large gate at the door. We had a lot of people that covered my costs. This next one I did, again, took a shit on pay-per-view, and I had a fucking blizzard, which basically put my gate into about a third in terms of viewers. Okay. So I'm losing money trying to do this, but it's important. And so for me to do this in a sustainable way, I need people that see the vision of Shoot Pro Wrestling, which is competitive grappling under pro wrestling rules. We held the first ever competitive tag team matches and tournament and competitive tag team champions. The first truly competitive triple shoots, which are like a triple threat match in WWE, plus all the straight singles catch can matches. Okay. Just did the middleweight tournament. Jacoby Jones is our champ. Great champ too, by the way. Super charismatic. Totally gets the concept. But I need sponsors. So, and I'm not like, I want this to happen. So I'm ready to incentivize you. You give me good qualified sponsors. And I'm not talking a little money. For example, a couple of years ago, I tried to book Gordon Ryan. Now, this is before he got as big as he is now, but he wanted $7,000 for a match. I just didn't have it. And now it's going to be totally absurd out of my. So I need sponsors that, one, understand the concept, understand the vision, and understand the upside for themselves. If I have a video that gets in front of 25,000 people, this was the MVP, the minimum viable product that I put out, right? Vaporware. That's evergreen marketing. You're in the canvas, whatever that sponsor's brand. You're on the turnbuckles, you're on the screen burns up here, right? I need sponsors. So if you could send them my way, I would not only be very grateful, but I will also give you a finder's fee. Okay. So I'll give you a percentage of the amount that you bring into me as sponsors. You can send them the Shoot Pro Wrestling shows. The production value gets better and better. And as I have money, I can hire more people. I know what I'm doing. Okay. That's the first. I need sponsors for Shoot Pro Wrestling. The second is I need people to join the Scientific Wrestler Affiliate Fight Gym program. scientificwrestler.com. This is literally a business in a box. Literally a business in a box. Okay. I've designed this with profitability and revenue in mind because I understand the importance of sustainability. That if people are going to help me on my mission is to get every man, woman, and child on the planet involved in improving themselves through scientific wrestling, catch as catch can, competitive catch as catch can, as either a fan, athlete, coach, promoter, or some combination of those four. Okay, that's my mission. I need affiliate fight gyms in the same way that there are affiliates for Gracie Barra, that's actually a franchise, or CrossFit, or 10th Planet, or it. What we do is different. There is no belt system. Okay, so you may like that or you may not like that. It is what it is. But you will make money with this system. Go to the Scientific Wrestler page, scientificwrestler.com. Look at the offer. And what I've added to it, in addition to all the ways you can make money with it, and I'm the one holding the standard. Like, I don't let it droop or fall. Like, I'm very hardcore about it. That's why Billy and Carl trusted me with the curriculum, with the rule sets. I've just added a digital agency that works with some of the biggest gyms, fight gyms in the world. They just sent me a case study, a white paper, where they got these guys 1,000% return on their ad spend. You get 2 months of working with them to work on your digital ads. Do you understand what 1,000% return is? Do you know how big that is? 10x, 10 times. Okay, it's a very good return on your investment. So not only will it help you, but it will help me on my mission, right? So anyway, I appreciate you guys sticking in there. It's been a whole hour already. I got to get out of here. Got things to do, more clients to see tonight. I appreciate you guys. As ever, I am here every weekday. Who knows when I pop in? I try to be everywhere, but I was banned on Facebook for some weird reason. Again, I think it has to do with live streaming and the terms of service. So hopefully I can get back on there and start doing it. If I can help you, let me know. Meanwhile, check out shootprowrestling.com. Check out scientificwrestler.com. That's really where I could use some real help. I appreciate you guys. And